One of my biggest learning has come from a book. It is called Built to Last, and it actually talks about everybody in the ecosystem believes that you start with an idea, you have to connect with the problem. Actually, it builds a case that 50% of largest companies started with the concept of starting a company, and a great concept there is company is nothing but a great people machinery. A company which learns how to hire, groom people eventually becomes an institution and long-lasting company.
Right.
That book has had the most impact on how I think about company building.
Hey Neha, hey Abhishek. Really good to finally catch up and connect. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Hey, excited to be here. Thanks a lot for having us.
So, Neha, Abhishek, before we dive in, we have a new question for our guests, uh, which is what Peter Thiel uses, and I think we like it. So, Neha, maybe this one's for you. What's one truth that very few people agree with you on that you strongly believe in?
So that's a very interesting question. So one of the things that I feel that not a lot of people, I think would agree on that is, I believe that the fun in building a company actually increases every year. A lot of the people that I see, when they are starting up, they feel that the initial part is, a lot of problem solving. That's the fun part, and then when it becomes big, then it becomes, sort of boring. But I feel that the power of of the company actually increases much more by each year, and you for you it is much more action that you see every year.
Amazing. I think, yeah, I think a lot of people don't agree there. I, I, I I think a lot of people are like, hey, first 5, 6 years are super exciting, and then it just becomes very less exciting. And I think when many founders leave after some time period, that belief kind of gets reinforced, where people are like, hey, 7, 8 years, we are done. So that's awesome.
Right.
Um, Abhishek, now I know we are doing this like with two of you, so we'll try to cycle through the questions with the two of you. Would love to start with both of your stories. Early days, any entrepreneurial influences. You ended up at college, then you both joined VC firms at some point. Um, how was that journey? How did you meet? Um, and then how did traction happen? Would love to talk through that.
So I born and brought up in Bombay in a very academic environment, I would say. So was born in a colony called BARC, Baba Atomic Research Center, wherein nearly half of the people are actually scientists. So it is a very
You also,
academically
I think,
oriented
right?
environment.
Very good view also. It's in Kolaba. Yes.
Yes, yeah. So there's a Colaba, and then there's another one
Okay.
also there. So there's a big, sort of colony that I grew up in. And for me, business was or startup was never the way of life, because if I look at my family or my immediate family as well as extended, there aren't people who are doing business. The way it happened is basically I graduated from IIT Bombay in computer science, and initially got exposed to a lot of businesses when I joined BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, and then Sequoia Capital, where I could see it in action. How so I was mainly focusing on the technology space and could actually see how companies are applying technology, in various businesses. And that is where the idea of Tracxn was actually born. So this is a platform that I really wished I had when I was an investor. So we used to do all the things that is now available. We actually used to do it manually, and we thought that if you look at the public markets, the investors have the luxury of having platforms like a Bloomberg or a Refinitiv. And when you're looking at private markets, you literally had to build the whole stack yourself. And being like com science undergrads, you thought that you could actually use technology to make this information also much more organized and easily available. So that's how the idea of Tracxn was actually born. And I'll let Abhishek also give an introduction.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Marwadi family. So everybody around me was doing some kind of small scale business, and dinner table conversations was always around job versus doing your own shop. And I was always academically oriented. I was top 100 and JEE rankers in the batch, went to IIT Kanpur, did computer science. And fortunately started my career in tech, worked in Yahoo and then in Amazon in their tech teams. And I was among the youngest CTO in my batch, became CTO at 26, managed a team of like 80 people then, and then joined VC. I went to Excel between 2008 to 10, and this was the period when internet was just happening in India. I was fortunate enough to meet Flipkart in early days, and uh, I ended up helping lead first seed round there. And after that, I figured out that internet is going to happen, or tech wave is coming to India, so it's time to probably start again. And I had also done some similar work with respect to what Neha was thinking, and then over time we joined hands, and in 2013 we started this together. And we thought that we were both programmers and technologists turned VCs, and we were hardly using any technology to make our own lives easier. And it started with a small idea, but over time, as we drew inspiration from public market financial data companies like Bloomberg, Refinitiv, Capital IQ, we realized that one could build a very large, scalable platform here. And we are now 9 years down the road, and it has been a lot of fun.
Understand. And how did you guys meet? What's the story
Yeah.
there? Um, also,
Yeah,
like
so
the
that's actually very interesting.
yeah, also like the
Sorry, go on,
traction
Abhishek.
idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed very natural for the two of you, given your investing backgrounds, but specifically doing this, would love to deep dive into that.
Yeah, so how did we meet? So that's a very interesting story. So I was moving to VC. This was way back in 2010, a decade back, when people were not aware of venture capital funds. Now everyone knows about unicorn, about the funds. They would know about the name. At that time, the term unicorn also did not exist, and people didn't know about funds. So when I was looking to move, and I had got an offer from a few funds, then I was actually so the person who was working with me in BCG was apparently Abhishek's batchmate from IIT Kanpur. And then when I was wanting to figure out, okay, what are these VCs, which is a good fund to join, etc. So then this person told, oh, I know a friend of mine who's also in VC. So that's how initially we got connected. So Abhishek was already in Excel and had been there, and this was like a decade back when I probably the number of people in the VC would be just about like under 50 in India overall. So that's the first. And coming to the next part, which is how did traction idea how did this all start? So this was based on our personal pain point. So both of us, while our respective stints at different funds, had made one version of the platform to make our lives easy. So it would be, for me, it was more around, okay, when I'm looking at a company, can I look at all the peer set instantly? I can, when I'm looking at sourcing new companies, can I do something to be able to source new companies without having to go through newspapers or, various platforms? Can I do something in an automated manner to be able to do that? So that was, the initial set of code that I had written, and by exchanging notes, I realized that Abhishek had also written some set of tools for himself to help his work while he was investing. So that was like a common point of interest, and obviously we discussed about it probably for a year. Being VCs ourselves, having having been used to analyze sort of markets and business models and ideas before we actually took the plunge, we actually spent a year in analyzing it, and we realized that private markets are going to become large. This was again like a decade back when the term unicorn did not exist. So that's when we took the plunge, and obviously now now everyone knows about all these companies and about this growing ecosystem.
And I think thanks a lot to you for this. You know, as an investor myself, Traction we use on a daily basis, to see someone's cap table, to see what they've raised, get any information. It's wonderful. But beyond this ecosystem, I think beyond the investor ecosystem, very few people know what Traction is. So if you could, talk about what you do at Traction, what is it solving for? What's the real problem statement? That'd be very helpful.
Sure. So, Tracxn is basically a SaaS-based platform. It's a financial data platform. Anyone who's looking at private markets, be it for investment or be it for M&A or be it for looking at new technology solutions which come in, they can use our platform. Right? On the back end, we obviously use a lot of technology as well as sector focus analyst team to make the unorganized information very organized uh, for people who are looking at companies, for people who are looking at emerging technology sectors. Right? So that's in brief of what Tracxn is. In terms of who we work with, so we work with venture capital funds, we work with private equity funds, as well as we work with large corporates. So another interesting thing that people don't know is nearly half of our customer base is actually corporates who are using it either for driving their M&A, corporate strategy, as well as your innovation teams, which are looking at new solutions which come in the industry every day. So that's a brief about Tracxn.
How do corporates use it? What's the use case for them? Like I understand investors using it because it's a financial data platform for private companies, but for corporates, what's the use case?
Yeah. So in corporates, we today work with more than 70 Fortune 500 corporations, right? These are primarily large corporations that we work with. And we work with their, typically two teams. One is your M&A team, corp dev team or M&A team who are looking at acquisition targets. For instance, if you're in an industry, you're looking at very specific targets based on your strategic interest. You are actually able to scan the markets globally. You are able to find companies, analyze companies. So that's one use case. And the second is your innovation teams or your technology offices. One of their use case is, if you're looking at if you're looking at a very traditional software like HR software, you will go to the typical large IT vendor, like a Gartner or a Forrester, to discover the top of the pyramid. But for all the upcoming software, for instance, if a bank wants to partner with the eKYC solution, or if I want to look at any of the other vendors coming up in my industry, they also help discover a lot of these technology partners through our platform.
That's a great segue into our topic for this week's episode, which is building a financial data company out of India. And it's amazing you hear about these data companies. Most of them are based in New York, some in London, but very few in India. And so I want to go back to your kind of initial journey when you were deciding to start. Can you walk us through the thought process and what kind of drove that decision just to start your company in India?
So when we were launching, so we actually got started in 2013 when I was doing my MBA in Stanford between the first and the second year. And interestingly, we started as US as the first market because all the initial set of customers in private market investors, both VCs and corporates, were all in that vicinity, right? And for us, we realized, 3 months down as we were building the company, we realized that to build this company, it's not just technology which is going to be a key component, but also sector focus analyst, which is going to be, as well as data operations, is going to be a key component of making it successful. And that is when we actually started setting up the whole operations and building the team in India. Right? So this was end of 2013. And I think if we were planning to launch a solution which was purely tech, then probably we might have launched the company in US, which is what we were debating. But as soon as it became clear that you require to actually make enterprise grade data, it is not just anything that can be solved by just tech, but you actually have to you need to curate it, you need to make it actionable, and you need to also have the other team that is required to make it actionable for the segment of users and make it more enterprise grade. So that is when we actually started hiring the team. And if you look at it, India is a great talent for that. Like if you look at all the large data company, India has been the back office for all these data companies, right? Like if you look at it, even in the public markets, be it FactSet, S&P, if you look at even other segments, like even McKinsey Knowledge Centers, Global Knowledge Center, would be in India. Gartner's office would be in India. So India is a good pool of analysts, I would say. And so hence, if we have to build a data company out of India, then, this, or data company, then India is a great ground for that. So that is when we actually, sort of started also scaling the team over here.
No, makes a lot of sense. That insight that it's not just software, but also a lot of human effort going into it. Uh, and Abhishek, maybe one for you. Can you tell us a bit about how you got your first few customers?
Absolutely. So I think uh, so we initially in US we were incubated out of Lightspeed office,
Okay.
and at that time I think also one of the VCs had partners had come to Stanford to give a lecture. So Neha was speaking to him, and so Lightspeed and NEA in US became among our first few customers. So people we knew, they became our customers. And in India, I think we knew a bunch of VCs. So we reached out to some of them and they became customers. So first 10, I think customers were people we knew from past, and we
Personal network.
tried getting them as paid customers, not as a beta customer. We sold them full price packages so that we validate if there's a real need or they are being just kind to us. And after that, we started reaching out to more people through either introductions or people um, through what we thought they would need this platform. So we reached out to some of them. But I think first few has to be through your network and introductions.
And want to just dive a bit deeper into that. Like, how did you convince those first few customers? I mean, what did you? I'm sure your product was very far away from what it is today.
Correct.
What was the key pain point or the
Right.
biggest kind of value proposition that you were bringing to them?
So I think that's an interesting thing. We actually spent quite a bit of thought in figuring out what to build first, because so we are kind of a vertical SaaS product. So we are building a product for a industry, and there are n number of ways you can enter this. So the wedge can be different. Over time, when we were thinking, we realized that we wanted to start with a product which is quite close to its peak price point. So instead of starting with, let's say, $30 a month product or $20 a month product, we wanted to start which is somewhere close to 500 or $1,000 per month price point. And the other thought was also that that first few modules should also enable us to build the entire skill set. And when we spoke to a lot of our customers, we realized that sector-based sourcing was one of the first things that a lot of people were ready to pay significantly more money for. And it also enabled us to price properly with skill set that is required. So eventually we started with building one sector, which was called cybersecurity. It was very hot in US at that time. So we launched cybersecurity. We started publishing interesting companies there. And at some stage, our customers said that, oh, this output is great. So that's when we started exploring other sectors. Interestingly, Bitcoin was the second sector we published, and 3D printing was the third one. So these were like somewhat more sectors which are very prominent in US, and that's what the start of the journeys. And once we got 3, 4 sectors going, then rest was lot more easier.
And I think just to add, one of the things that we initially spend a lot of time is figuring out the product, right? Because what I would say is that our product is a little bit of a greenfield. It's a little bit of greenfield market. So, for instance, there wasn't a product that existed before that what we started. So it wasn't like you were building a better version of a CRM that you could say that it's a CRM with better features. So you didn't have anything to compare against, and that is why you had to actually think about the platform, the product, as well as the pricing of what users are willing to pay to do that. So I think that we initially spend about 1 quarter in just figuring out what is the module and what is the pricing to launch with. And once we got the initial set of customers, so the second thing is probably doing the initial sales has to be done by the founders. So all the initial customers were probably gotten by two of us. And once we had got the ball rolling, initial set of customers were very happy to pay for the value that we were providing to them, and that is when we the whole sort of ball gets rolling.
Amazing. And I think it's a lesson for our listeners, right? That everyone talks about an MVP, think about the kind of basic, most simple version of the product, but you also really need to think about price, and it's a big difference, right? Selling a product that's $1,000 a month versus a $30 a month product, and also expectation. And I just want to understand the thought process behind this, and what, like, how did you justify that price point, right? Like, was it one industry you guys focused on? You were getting data on it.
So I think everybody does some form of anchoring. So for example, if you had started that CRM product, then people say that, look, Salesforce is at $30, maybe $50, and your product is nowhere close to Salesforce. So how can you charge double of that? So there will always be anchoring. I think in our case, Bloomberg is today at $20,000 a year pricing. So when we went and said that, okay, we will charge $5,000 per year for first seat, then people anchored us against financial data and Bloomberg became our benchmark. So you have to, when you're initially pricing, you have to very clearly think about anchoring which customer will use to figure out if it's a right price or not.
That's a great insight. Yeah, so you anchor them to financial data, and then and so now to kind of talk more about this data that you're getting, what were some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you scale it? You went from one industry to how many industries are you guys doing today, and how do you kind of keep it all running together?
Right. Yeah, so I would say that is one of the key things that we have probably solved and that we started off with. Because, if you just compare, like if you compare to the public markets, you're talking about just about 50,000 companies globally. But when you're talking about private market, you're talking about a few million companies globally. And that too very unstructured information about it. So how do you get that? How do you do that? Just to give an example, at the back end, we actually track like every domain which went live yesterday, right? So we track more than 500 million entities on the back end, and what we publish onto the platform is basically the things which are more interesting, which is bubble, which has been sort of curated by our team, which is little less than 2 million companies today which we have on our platform. So that is that is one of the key things that you're talking about. So technology obviously has a big role to play in it, wherein you are looking at large sets of data, uh, and you're sort of aggregating large sets of data. The second part I would say is the more intelligence layer, which is where your team of analysts also come in. So basically, you have an AI engine, and you basically have to tell the engine what is good, right? If you, for instance, one of the things that we do is we try to capture interesting companies which are investable. And what I mean by investable is, for instance, if you're looking at an SME, if you're looking at a taxi company, SME taxi company is not very interesting, but a tech-enabled taxi company like an Uber or a Lyft is interesting, right? Similarly, a single shop is not interesting, but a hospital chain is interesting, or a chain of those ice cream shops, for instance, that is interesting.
And I think it would make a great example. I mean, like pick one that's good, but how would you tell the difference if you see a company, whether they're a SME taxi company or an Uber?
Right, exactly. So that is a problem, one of the problems that we have actually solved. And the probability of identifying this company when we started was probably 1%. That you have to look at 100 companies to be able to, we would identify, like we would be able to identify a company with the accuracy of 1%. Today it's as high as 50%. And that is how, over the last 8 years, the data that has been fed back about what is interesting, what is not interesting, and obviously we parameterize each of the companies that we look at across, 100 plus variables. And it is fed back based on what the analysts have told it's a good system or a good company or not. So I think over time, that efficiency has increased a lot.
That's incredible. I would love to learn a bit more about that. Certainly a supervised learning algorithm that you set up. I mean, how are you guys, giving it feedback, and the analysts are just picking companies that they like? Uh, yeah, whatever you could share about that would be fascinating.
So I think it's a conventional or it's a sort of lightweight Bayesian system.
Okay.
So every company has hundreds of signals on their website, outside. And over time, based on what we have seen in past, we say that what is the likelihood of this company being interesting based on all these 100 signals that are present on this website.
Makes
And
sense.
then you try to make an algorithm on top of it. But it's largely as much a big data problem because you have 600 million domains on one side and hundreds of variables on each website. So
Yeah.
I think so that is one thing that we have been working on for last 9 years. And actually today, one of the ways to look at it is today our AWS bill is more than our office rentals. So, so that
And we
is
have
sort
an
of a
800 member team.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not a small office; it's a meaningful office. So that is a testimony to how much big data has gone into solving this problem.
Amazing. And I mean, when you're tackling a problem at that scale, costs must have risen like crazy. And I believe in 2021, you actually got to profitability and you cut your cost down by something crazy. I think it was a 10x reduction in cost. So please tell us how you did that. What was the strategy, and how did you actually execute?
Yeah, but I think so one of the decisions that we had taken early in the life cycle is, whether you build the company for M&A or you build the company for long term. It's a very subtle thing, but actually, after having been VCs ourselves and having seen the journey, if you raise VC capital, you either end up going for the M&A path or you end up going for the listing path. These are typically two ways. And when you're thinking about the latter, you are thinking about your long term, all these parameters much early. So I think, funnily, we had actually thought about it even the initial, initial few years while building the company, that this is a very deep market, and we would love to continue to build this company for the next 40 years. And hence a lot of the cost structure, a lot of the processes that we had set was by keeping in that in mind. So if you look at it, also having having enterprise customers and having the cost arbitrage of selling globally and making in India also contributed to that factor that we could become profitable much early. So that was one of the things that had gone in. So I think we were probably very cognizant about that when we were building, and we turned thankfully profitable. Also on the cash flow as well as on the bottom line side. And when we turned profitable, that's when we had actually started preparing for listing in India.
And I mean, maybe a more general question for founders who are listening to this. How do you plan to build a company for the long term? I think it's almost a temptation, especially for founders, first time founders who have raised VC money, to kind of just think about hitting numbers and trying to get to the M&A kind of side of it. Any advice on how do you build a company and what the priorities or differences are between these? Because I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of examples.
Correct.
Right.
No, so when you're building for long run, you have to practically think of solving everything which can continue to run for a very long time. Or other way to think about this is that every time you encounter a new thing, you don't hustle your way through it. You think what is the long-term answer, and then you build that machinery which can keep delivering results. So, for example, if I were to hire, let's say, a finance person or a product manager, I can just ask around in my network and get one or two people and get done with it. Or I can figure out how will this company keep hiring product managers efficiently over long runs, set up a process and a protocol, and then a team or a bunch of recruiters can run it scalably over next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And it becomes a scalable machinery. So that is like hustle versus setting up processes for long run. That is one of the key differentiation between building for long term versus building for a short exit. Eventually, you will have to solve problems. The company will build to last company will stay for 50 to 100 years. So eventually you will reach a point where you need to solve all of these and make a stable state system.
I quite like that. I mean, that's a good way to think about it. Building processes rather than hustling. That's great. And I want to ask about the culture of the company. I think it's a very unique company where it's a fine balance between human analysis and technology kind of sourcing the human analysis. I know that this is a horrible question to ask, but I think we'll learn a lot from the answer. What's the culture like? And maybe some anecdotes that can help us understand what the culture is like.
So I can add a couple of things here. So as you were saying that rightly said that tech is a key component. We have a tech and we have people, nearly 100-member tech team, as well as people outside the tech department. An essential component part of the culture is basically everyone, even it's outside, has to know tech. So this is a very interesting thing that we make it part of the leadership across departments. So just to give an example, we nearly have a 40-member automation engineering team, which is outside tech. So obviously the tech is spending a lot of time in building the platform, the customer facing as well as the backend, platform. But there's a lot of tech which also goes in other, wherein we are processing data, wherein we are standardizing filings across 20 different countries. We are, extracting information from scanned images, which is available about private companies across various formats. So that is a core component. So this is one interesting part of the culture, that you'll see that every leader, be it in tech as well as in the other sector, has to know technology.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think it's you wouldn't expect it. I think it's been surprising to me that tech plays such a big role considering the product that you guys have. And one more question about the competition. I mean, you mentioned that this is greenfield, but you're essentially using public data, and so what do you believe is your moat? Is it the algorithm, or what is it? What's the
Right. So if you look at the data, I think a good parallel to draw is probably like in the public markets. Like even if you look at public markets, there are companies which are giving you very structured information on a quarterly basis, and that information. But the beauty is basically in standardizing that information and making it very actionable and drawing the next level of insights on top of it, which can then be used by the investors. So I think that is what also exists in the private market data space, that there is information which is there publicly as well as the proprietary information that we build on top of it. That is also a key component of it. But the more moat is making it more actionable and drawing the next level of actionable insights on top of it. For instance, there's a set of companies, but what an investor would want is, I want to look at a company who's doing revenue based financing in India or globally. So can I help to show that that set of company instantly? The next is, if you're looking at a company, I want to look at your global comms. Who else does the same? For instance, your 10-minute or 20-minute delivery. How has that sector panned out across all the regions globally? Can I help to show you that? So I think the beauty is also making it very actionable for the end consumers, which is key component of your mode.
Neha, Abhishek, now in terms of what's next for you guys, how are you thinking of the company next, let's say 2 to 3 years? What are key goals? What are you planning to achieve? I would love to walk through that.
So one of our long-term, I would say goal is to build a iconic data company out of India. Uh, India has been the back office for a lot of large data companies, if you were to say, and then, can you actually create a large global financial data company out of India? So that's our long-term goal. In the more shorter term, I think we want to focus and continue to solve more problems of the private market. I think we have done in the last 8 years, we've probably launched about bunch of modules. But I guess how can we actually continue to keep taking feedback and keep solving more of the problems? So I think that is more of the immediate one, and the other aspect is basically reaching out to more set of customers. Like for instance, we today have customers in 50 different countries. How can we go more deeper into the countries wherein we already have good critical mass of customers that exists?
Understand. Got it. And you talked about being pretty large outside of India. I know that's something that a lot of people don't know about you. If you can talk through that, and then
So actually, it's quite interesting. We actually launched US first. We never launched India in the first few months. So I think in 2012, Neha did write a small prototype, which she showed to few investors here in India. And she went to Stanford in 2013. And during the first year and second year, I got free, and then I started working on it full time. And there was an incubation program where we started. So we knew largest market is in US, so we started building the company there, and we got our first few customers there. And we realized that India is going to be the back office. So I came back. Neha stayed back in US. She was selling there for herself, and I was taking care of delivery initially. And after 4 months, we realized that data we are building, a part of the data is also interesting for India, and we launched that. So US was always the big focus because that's where bulk of the VC or private market dollar is being invested, and it is true also for M&A markets. So today, like 70% of our revenue is international and 30% is India. And eventually, I think share of international can potentially even become larger because lot larger markets exist there.
understand. Awesome. So just to close out, and why we are called Founders Unfiltered, Abhishek, what's one piece of unfiltered feedback you received in your journey, either as a founder or in your career, that changed the way you looked at things? Brutal, honest is what
Correct.
we look for here. Uh,
Yeah. So I think I have taken, so it's not from a person. One of my biggest learning has come from a book. It is called Built to Last. And it actually talks about everybody in the ecosystem believes that you start with an idea, you have to connect with the problem. Actually, it builds a case that 50% of largest companies started with the concept of starting a company. And a great concept there is company is nothing but a great people machinery. A company which learns how to hire, groom people eventually
right,
becomes an institution and long lasting
right.
company. That book has had the most impact on how I think about company building. And so that is, I think, what has changed my thinking or company building forever. I think the other incident which really changed me forever was launch of AWS. I was at Amazon during that period.
Okay.
There was a lot of interesting internal. Obviously, everybody was excited that we're launching a great deal, and then everybody thrashed the idea. So I think there was front page news saying that Jeff Bezos has lost it. What are they doing? And so it taught me that even largest idea of our generation can be so misinterpreted or misunderstood in the early days. So it teaches you to keep your convictions even when everybody is saying no.
Hmm.
And that has happened to us as a founder. It happens to you every day. You will meet more non-believers than believers. So I think you have to like be able to look at long term and keep your conviction. Even when I at Axel, when I met Flipkart, everybody was saying no to that company, and I was 27 then. So I always thought that if AWS can get misunderstood, then like how can I judge other audiences or this idea? And when people are saying no, so I think willingness to be misunderstood. I think I saw it very very closely first time.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you, Neha. Thank you, Abhishek, for your time. Love the conversation. Learned a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Aviral.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mazin. It was
Thanks.
awesome to be, so to speak.